I actually was at a point where I was looking forward to go to work. This is the power of community and purpose. And then as things kind of got prolonged and forcing people to be home, you would see people's mental health be compromised, and you'd see the additive nature of that, where they are having more sick symptoms, their mood is impaired, they're less active. Like everything got disabled in some ways because of that lack of connection and lack of purpose.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Kwadwo, welcome to the Home of Healthspan. It is wonderful to see you again.
I must say, it's kind of cool. I'm going to call you like a new friend here, and seeing the work that you're doing to change the landscape of healthcare delivery, of our perception of what health is defined as, is bloody exciting, bud. And to be on this right now is juicy. So thank you for having me.
I love that that's where you started it, because I was going to say, last time we were catching up, this idea of what is health, right? And as someone who works as a physician in the medical profession, how do you define health and versus the system, right? Because you're one of those that it's not just a calling and a profession and everything, but it's a lifestyle for you personally as well. And so I'd love to hear from you how you think about that.
So Andrew, I must say my perception of it has changed over the last few years. I was one to, when I thought of health, it's functional. Like, are you able to get by? Are you living? Are you out of the hospital? Are you not stuck to a ventilator? And now my perception is changing, and it's more about how do we live optimally, because we just spent the last 4 years in a situation where we were lacking some of our core needs. Like, for example, connection. We weren't connecting as much as we would like to. We had, at some points, we weren't allowed to get to the gym and exercise and leave our homes. And so really there's been a lot of thought on how do we become our optimal selves and thrive. And that's where I like to try and focus. I think there's a lot of people that are at that state where they would love to be out of hospital. They would love to have more control of their chronic disease. But I'm most excited about people getting to a state where they can be their best selves and enjoy life and enjoy that quality of life. And the nature of my job, we had this conversation, maybe Andrew, in our last talk, but in my line of work, it's hard to die. Like it's really hard to die in 2024 with all the advances in technology and ventilators and life support. But it's that quality of life. How do we get to you a spot where you enjoy life again and do the things that are important to you? And so that's really a focus for me. And I think this is the way we need to approach things. Set the bar high.
There's so many things in there I want to unpack and absolutely love. In that one, I mean, this definition of health and that evolution from it's the absence of bad things to it is the proactive presence of good things. The Casey means good energy. Do you have vitality? Do you have energy? Do you feel good versus do you not feel bad? Are these things not a problem? Which is a huge, huge difference that the system overall needs to start understanding as we move from sick care to health optimization and acceleration, living that best life. And the other point, this is something that Lou and I talk about all the time, of the danger is not that you're going to die. The danger is you're going to spend your last 25 years immobile, losing your mind, not living the life that you actually want to live. That's the more dangerous problem, not the death problem in today's world, given all the technology, everything we do to keep people alive. Because guess what? As long as you're alive, we can bill insurance companies and make money off of it. So this may be the first time, and it's funny to start here with someone of your expertise, background, and profession, But you started here. So I really like to, if we think about the 5 pillars, connection and purpose, right? The one that I think for me personally was the last one that I've come to realize the importance of, wow, this needs to be on equal weight with my fitness, with my nutrition, with my sleep. Did you always know that? Or did you see it in the past 4 years of, wow, again, the absence of this has this impact. We really need to think about it. How did you come to that kind of awareness?
Oh, thanks for highlighting this, Andrew, because it's something that I feel pretty passionate about. It was in the last 4 years. We had a cycle. So during the pandemic, the early stages, my staff and myself, we had to go to work. We had no choice. We had a community with a single purpose, which was getting people through this pandemic. And it was very fulfilling. I actually was at a point where I was looking forward to go to work. Like this is that the power of community and purpose. And then as things kind of got prolonged and at times we weren't seeing the end in sight and we were seeing the school closures. I live in a province in Ontario where we had the longest school closures and one of the longest ones in North America, as an example, and forcing people to be home. You would see people's mental state, mental health be compromised, and you'd see the additive nature of that, where they are having more sick symptoms. Their mood is impaired. They're less active. Like everything got disabled in some ways because of that lack of connection and lack of purpose. And so we tried to create that in some ways. We had an online format for healthcare providers called Solving Wellness, which we got a grant to study, and we're in the second phases of that. And really just trying to be more proactive with it. And similar to you, Andrew, I felt this is an area where I needed to put more emphasis on. I still feel like this is one of my weaker areas, that and sleep, which we'll talk about. But yeah, this is an area where it gets overlooked at times, but the power of it, I'm seeing it on a regular basis now. Like I went to a conference in May where that connection, that the real everyone being in the same room together with that same purpose of learning and optimizing their health, it was so powerful. And you left there feeling so hopeful, and it lasted. Like that was the other thing. Like it lasted, and you were able to connect with people online later. But that power of connection, I think, is healing, and it's a necessity. If we've learned anything in the last 4 years, please, it's a necessity moving forward.
Yeah, we did not evolve as isolated creatures. Like if you think about without modern conveniences, these hairless, not relatively strong or fast creatures were not surviving without working in groups, right? That's why language evolved, all this. If we worked in groups, we have evolved to live in groups. And without that community, we are not human. We lose something that's core element to humanity and to the life that we've all been meant to have. So can you say it's called Solving Wellness?
Yeah, it was Solving Wellness. We launched it in, I think it was May of 2021, almost out of necessity. It was short version of the story was there was a respiratory therapist that was very normally stoic and resilient. And it was 4:00 in the morning, and we were looking at a COVID patient that we were trying to decide whether to put on a ventilator or not. And during that phase of the pandemic, if you committed to a ventilator, the patient was going to be on for at least 3 weeks. Like that was the trend we were seeing. So it was like this loaded decision at 4 a.m. And she broke down and started to get tearful. And I'm like, what's going on? And she was just like, I'm gassed. I'm tired. I've worked so many nights this week, but seeing these patients go through what they're going through, it's so hard, and we're not getting a break. And so I wanted to provide folks with healthcare providers with an arsenal of tools to help optimize their health. So the nutrition side, the movement side, including yoga, stress management, including some cognitive behavioral therapy advice, and on an online format. And I mean, with full transparency, Andrew, this is one of the endeavors that I wish, like I would call like one of my quote unquote failures that I've learned from. Like it didn't thrive as much as we thought it would. And I think a lot of that had to do with people were ready to be offline at the time. And
yeah.
And so now we've kind of pivoted now we're doing a study about doing some of this work in person, but it's one of those things that I'm sure you've experienced as an entrepreneur that at times you got to approach failure as a learning point. And this was one of the key ones that I'll remember for sure in terms of learning.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Shakespeare and Hamlet, that there's neither good nor bad. It's our thinking that makes it so. And it's the same. Failure is just a label that we can decide to put on something or not. Say, hey, here's objectively what happened. And I can call this a learning experience. I can call this failure. I can call this part of my education, right? There are all these other labels I can put on it. And do I put the failure label or not? That's entirely in my hands, how I want to define it.
I like that.
So having that not sticking as you wanted and as you projected, and you recognizing the importance of it, and it's a difficult one. What are some of the things you use and do to fill that bucket today? So, I mean, obviously, as an ICU physician, you have a lot of purpose in what you do. You just talked about that. Like, I was looking forward to going to work. Like, this purpose was pulling me in. That's part of it. And there's also this social connection piece that, hey, when we were all in it together and going, that worked, but then that also kind of burns us out. So today, kind of 4 years removed, what does that look like week to week or month to month to you on how you're able to fill that bucket?
Once again, Andrew, this is an area where I want to get better at, but right now I use this as a stacking. Like I often stack it with the other components. So, for example, exercise. So my biggest outlet for stress in general is exercise. And I play on usually 2 hockey teams. And when we're able to get out, and then so having the camaraderie of men's hockey, old man hockey it's been so valuable. Like it's not so much during the game. It's mostly after the game, whether you have your beers or just hang out outside the rink for a bit, have those laughs. That to me has been the real, over the years, the way I've formed connection has mostly been through sport. I have been part of a few local gyms here that do a lot of classes, and you get connected with the staff and some of the other members. So we do that. And like even today, myself, my wife and my sister-in-law, we went to a class together, and you're able to form connections that way. And then the other one that maybe is not intuitive is with my family. I'm the father of 3, and my wife's a psychologist, so we're both professionals. My schedule is unfortunately loaded at the least of times, and so trying to be real active in having connections with our boys, and of course, obviously my wife too. We try and forge these times where it's one-on-one with the boys, even if it's for 10 minutes. And I'm saying this not as if I'm perfect at this. I'm saying this is with the lens of this is the attempt. And so, yeah, we usually, whether it's driving them to their sporting events or at nighttime, just settling in with one of the boys and just hearing about their day. And also, we just recently had a big trip. We went to Ghana, see some family members there, and spending 3 weeks side by side, that you can't help but not to feel connected. So those are the main ways of late that I've been trying to feel connected and forge those connections. But I feel like I got to do a little bit better of a job, especially for my friends back home in Alberta, Yari, Jen, Big Mike, Brenda. I feel like we could stay connected a little bit more these days.
I do like that social fitness aspect that's becoming bigger and bigger. People are seeing, and you talked about making friends at the gym and talking to the people that work there, right? Like it's in the past year and a half, 2 years, stopped wearing headphones at the gym for that exact reason. I mean, let me go interact with these people, and we can't multitask, but in that world we can, because you're filling these 2 buckets at the same time, and you're getting more out of each by doing it, because you still only have 24 hours a day, right? So to the extent you can really fully be present of, hey, I can sit here and sweat with you and alongside you, and we can push each other and do all these wonderful things. It's a truly beautiful thing.
Sorry to interrupt, Andrew, but I got to take that advice about taking the headphones off at the gym. That's my next hack.
Yeah, it's I obviously get through fewer podcasts like this with it, but I think I get some other benefits that it's a bucket that I have to work on. And I also like that you pointed out, because I think a lot of people see on social media or books or TED Talks or podcasts and like, oh man, if I had it all figured out, like that person would be fine. Like, no, the reason we're talking about these things is because we're in the process of figuring it out. We wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't a struggle and something we had to figure out in the first place, because it would be so obvious to us that we wouldn't think to talk about it. We only talk about the things that aren't obvious to us that we're having to work on. So I really appreciate the transparency and the vulnerability there that you're sharing.
Absolutely. And because that's where, I think you and I have this in common, is that why people feel connected and inspired by some of the content that we throw out there is because there is an element of vulnerability there. It's a realism. And I wasn't cognizant, or I never put too much thought on this. This is just the way I show up. But yeah, being real with folks allows them to feel connected to you. And I do this also clinically. Like one of the most powerful moments I have is with families near end of life, like when their family members are dying. And it's a reason why I did palliative care training as well. And one thing that's totally changed the lens for me is after losing both parents is I completely have a different perspective as somebody that's been on the other side. And so I've shared that with family. I've said, listen, this is how I'd approach this. This was my loved one. I've lost my dad. I've lost my mom. And this is how I would approach this. I wouldn't want to see them suffering in this way. I'd want to be there. I'd want to hold their hand in their last hours and talk about the memories and why you love them. And that vulnerability that you have in that moment, I'll tell you, just from the feedback we've gotten from family members, it makes a huge difference on the experience. Because that, hopefully you haven't had to deal with much of this, but those days, hours leading up to your loved one dying is something you will never forget. You won't forget any part of that. And so to make it the least painful of an experience as possible, to me is paramount. That
real empathy of sharing. This isn't an expert on high saying you should do this. This is a human being who's been through this experience saying, here's what I would do because I've been through this. And you can relate to me as a person versus someone in a white coat or whatever telling you what to do. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. We'll come back to the sleep, but saying the things that I have a harder time with. But instead, I'd like to jump next to the fitness side, right? Is someone, you talked about the two different hockey leagues and obviously very, very active as you're growing up, but in a different season of life with 3 kids, with a job. It's very different than when we're a teenager, what fitness can look like and what you're able to do today. So what is your fitness routine? What does that look like for you?
So I'll give you 2 buckets, Andrew. One is the work week where I'm doing an ICU week where I got to be at hospital anywhere from 7 to 8 in the morning and be ready to go and not sure when I'm getting home. And with that first version, I'm all about consistency and efficiency. So I will bang out a 10-minute workout in the morning and the first thing. So the 2 buckets that I like to do for workouts will be either a kettlebell routine, which is usually like a Tabata swings or Tabata goblet squats, depending on what area of my body I'm going to focus on. But a classic one for me is Tabata kettlebell swings, have a quick warm up where I get my core, especially my core. I've had lower back issues in the past, making sure my core is primed. And then just jump into
Before
that.
we jump from the Tabata, can you define that it's the 20-10 for however many minutes?
Yeah, I should back that up. Yeah, so it's 20 seconds of as fast and hard as you could go and 10-second break recovery for 8 rounds. So depending on how good I feel on that morning, I might do 2 Tabata workouts, or I'll just do 1 based on how much time I feel like I have in the morning.
Yeah. And so a couple things on that, if you don't mind, just the research on that. So that's 4 minutes. They did these studies that people doing that versus people, I think it was cardio on a bike or something, for 30 minutes had even better impact and results. And so it's super efficient. When you say, I don't have time, you're just hearing someone who you would hear that time. You're like, well, you clearly don't have time to work out then. And you say, no, I'm going to carve out 10 minutes. And guess what? The difference between 0 minutes and 10 minutes is infinitely bigger than 10 minutes to 60 minutes. Just getting that something in is hugely impactful, and you can get quite a benefit like the Tabata workout. So I appreciate you sharing those.
I couldn't phrase it any better, Andrew, about the data to support it. Like, this is why the myth busting, or whatever the term is, would be so valuable right now, because a lot of people think, yeah, you got to bang out that 30 minutes of steady cardio, whereas this is just as efficient or just as beneficial or more, especially if you add the weight elements, the resistance training to it. So yeah, I'll do that depending on how much time I have. The other one I'll do is like a whole body circuit. So I'll do in our basement, because of COVID, I was like, we're never going without a gym again. So I got like a proper gym downstairs. So I'll do a push. If you want details, I'll do 5x5, a circuit of 5 bench press, and I'll do 5 of posterior chain, so like deadlifts, and then 5 squats, and I'll just go do a cycle of that and different variations. Like sometimes it's classic deadlift, sometimes it's Romanian, sometimes it's sumo, and just do that in a constant cycle for 5 rounds of 5. And so the weight isn't necessarily super heavy, but because I'm doing that and finishing in about 8 to 9 minutes, you're cardiovascular wise, you're gassed. Yeah. And so, but it's efficient. Like, you're done. Like, that's my workout for the day. And because it's not like totally fatiguing the muscles, I could do that every day. I'll do it 5 days a week as an example. And then the last one that I'll do, which my trainer got me on, shout out to Emma Bissonette, the landmine training, which is like, if you ever, I got to shed you this link of the Landmine University. It is absolutely game changing. So it's, you got the landmine, so the Olympic bar fits into that socket, and you could just put it in the corner of the gym or the wall, and you're basically doing these explosive exercises that are great for, like, it's like a cheap man's powerlifting, or it's like a safer version of powerlifting. So I'm just going to show an example, so there's no audio for a second, but like the clean and jerk. You're literally down here, pull it up here, and then snatch it like this. And there's a whole bunch of variations in terms of sets and obviously weight. And you could do one of those workouts for 10 minutes. You are done. And I can't believe how much benefit I've gotten. Like, I've actually gained a little bit of muscle mass focusing on the landmine side. And my coach, Emma Bissonette, she's done some training locally here, and it's growing in popularity. But that's another one that I'll do during the work week.
Yeah, I mean, that one's a nice one too, because of how it's working your body into quadrants, right? So very good for the balance to avoid injuries down the line.
And the power side also like translates well into sports. Like, right now, I'm a bit old man, so like somewhere I'm doing baseball or softball, taking the break off of hockey. But yeah, even like home run swings, man. Like, I just feel like it's all translated well since entering my life.
It's a great combo. So you have the social fitness side, and then you have the super efficient, hey, I'm cranking out at home side, and getting the right equipment to be able to do that with the home gym.
For real. And not to drag this out too much, Andrew, but the other aspect is, if I have like a week like this where I'm clinical or non-clinical doing administrative work, I'll do a class, or I'll just do focused strength training, where I typically do 5x5. So like it's a chest day, it's a back day, it's a leg day, and bang that out usually at home. But yeah, I like doing the fitness classes as well for the reasons we talked about before.
So, I mean, you brought up a point within the fitness that I think it kind of leads us naturally on the sleep and recovery side of you're not using high enough weight that you need 48 hours of recovery around it. And so I think this is something that the science may still be out there, but people are learning more of, hey, if you push yourself to 100%, you may over the long run end up not as far advanced because of the time you have to take off, not just on injuries, but the time for the recovery. And so for training, depending on what your objectives are, you may be actually better served for this kind of approach. So how do you think, and maybe we'll talk about them in two separate buckets, the recovery and the sleep, because it sounds like sleep is a little more difficulty. But on the recovery side, are there any kind of products or anything you do or use to help your body recover or your mind?
Yeah. So first point I'd like to illustrate, Andrew, is that the whole point of not pushing myself too hard. Like, so my goals, just to clarify, have been like staying functional and not injured after hurting my back a few years ago. That was, I mean, everyone's hurt their back, but that one left me scarred a little bit. So functional and strong. Like I like to focus on strength, and the book Easy Strength kind of changed my perspective on how to approach it. It's Dan John and Pavel Tatslutsin, and they have this program where it's a concept of like being farmer strong. Like, you know how farmers are like the strongest people you've ever met, and they're not necessarily lifting, doing 1 rep maxes for a lot of the stuff that they're carrying. It's just because they're constantly using their muscles. So it's the same principle where you're doing whole body exercises, but not to max. And using an approach like that you will see some strength gains. You won't necessarily build up the bulk up, like if that's part of your goal, but getting strong for sure. I've seen some benefits that way. And so in my recovery, there's a couple of thoughts that I have, and I don't necessarily have the best science to back this up. It's mostly just what I find works for me. I like to, if I'm overdoing it, I like to drink BCAAs because I know that there's some data to support that it reduces delayed onset muscle soreness, so that keeps me functional the next day. I'm a big believer of stretch, like doing some stretching like dynamic stretching and then I'm not always best at doing it immediately post, but my evenings as a wind down, I do some stretches, which I think, in my opinion, helps out with the recovery side. And then third, I just kind of listen to my body, like, and having injured your back, that to me has been a signal or a way of exercising of that quote, listening to your body. Because if your back's feeling like it's not ready to go, then you give it a break, and it's okay to work on other things. Maybe you're working on core that day as when you thought you'd be doing some back. So I in terms of recovery, just listening to the body and giving it a break. And then lastly, I'm big on like walking. Like I feel like as much as I can, I'll make any excuse to walk. Like if I have the time, walk to work or walk back from work, even if it's one way. Like, I personally feel like this is a good way of adding some recovery to your daily practice. But I haven't done too many sexy things. Like my boys, we have an ice bath, like from NeuroCure.
Yeah.
How do I say it?
Neurocover.
Yeah, Neurocover. Yeah, and so the boys do it. I gotta get enough going. I got enough strength to do it. I still am. I do the cold shower, but I still haven't done that. And then sauna time, more for like, for me, it's more the longevity data, but not necessarily recovery. I know there's some Huberman data to say, or I shouldn't say Huberman. I heard on Huberman some data to support that maybe there is some recovery purpose, but I'm not totally up to date with the science.
And on the sauna, are you using dry sauna, infrared? Like what kind of sauna?
Yeah, dry sauna, like classic sauna. Nice. And I won't lie, like I love it. Like it's my favorite part of our household is you get your workout in, you go for a swim, whatever it might be, and then you just dip into that sauna for a little bit. Oh man, it somehow could get up to 180 degrees in that bad boy. It's a W for sure.
Yeah, it's something pretty great. I was in Finland last winter, and going those where they do that next level, and then you're jumping in the icy pond and everything.
So you do that?
I did while I was there. Yeah, so I was by myself. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm by myself, and so I'm pushing it and come back. And I was like, I started at 30 seconds and did 90, and then I was at like 5.5. The guy's like, wait, that might be the record. And I'm like, whoa, I'm glad I didn't know there was a record, because I probably would have stayed longer than I should have. I was just trying to build it up as I was doing my rotations. But
wow.
Yeah, it's, normally in the winters, I swim year round in the ocean. So I just kind of treat that as ice bath. The water itself's not that cold, but when you're in it for an hour plus, I mean, it really is sucking the heat out of you. And I don't warm up for another 8 hours or so after.
Wow.
So it's as cold as I need. That's pretty good recovery routine. What about on the sleep side? Because it sounded like that one was one you might have a little harder time with.
Oh man. So my problem for sleep, just to be concise, Andrew, is just the duration. Like, yeah, that's my main issue. I have a tough time going to sleep right after the kids go down, and I have to wake up early because of my job. And so you end up going to bed. I end up probably falling asleep before midnight, 11:30 to 12, and then getting up anywhere from 6 to 6:30 usually. And so it's not the optimal duration, but because of that, I try and manipulate my quality of sleep. And so what I do at the beginning of the day as much as I can. So I do my workout, then I'll just go outside and make sure I get some sunlight first, like after my workout. Maybe sip on the coffee for a little bit and then start to give her, knowing what we have in store for the day ahead. And I will start thinking about sleep roughly after supper. So little things. So I try not to eat too late for sure. I've noticed that if I have a big meal, it affects my sleep quality. I try not to, I've been totally reduced my alcohol intake. So I don't try and drink. My goal is not to drink at home. It's to drink more socially, like if we're out for dinner or out with friends. So that to me has helped as well for quality. Then I'll put on blue blocking glasses in and around the post supper, especially if we're watching some Netflix or whatever it might be, or you're on your phone. I tell people this, but I'm not the best at this, to try and be on screens after an hour before you go to before your bedtime. I'm not good at that. I'm good at not scrolling my screen before bed. Like that to me has been the change that I've over the years, but my phone is still in my room. I still use it as an alarm. So I'm still doing that. I'll ingest some magnesium glycinate right before I go to bed, about 400 milligrams.
What brand that are you using?
Oh, we're using Guyata, our new brand. Check it. Dun, dun, dun. Does that come across?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Turn it. There we see it.
Yeah, there we go. Our new brand that we've launched, just Health Canada approved, using high quality ingredients. So many people were asking me what do I like to take, and so I figured let's start our own thing. So that's the type that we use.
Is it available in the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely available in the U.S. And we'll have a promo code for a Lively folks, and we want to get we want to get the word out for sure.
Yeah.
And then in terms of other parts of sleep, I use eye cover. I don't use earplugs. I don't like the feeling in my ears. What else? I feel like I'm missing something. Oh yeah, stretching. I just like to do a little stretch routine before going down. No screens, just quiet, and that's pretty. And then cool bed. So big fan of Chili Pad. Big fan, like that's a game changer. And blackout blinds, all the right things.
Now, so, eye mask for me was a huge game changer. And you talk about Chili Pad, absolutely, right? I sleep hot, and that was next level unlock. But the eye mask, I had no idea how light sensitive I was. And especially if you're traveling, you can't always have blackout screens, but that you can kind of get it. Now, I heard you say you don't like the feel of the earplugs, but you have AirPods in now. So it's something that like, it may be the type that you have. I don't know if you've tried wax earplugs, but getting wax earplugs for me was another kind of unlock game changer. Dead cheap, super, super effective, and totally moldable in a different way than putting those foam things in. So
I got to try that. I got to try that out because I've been like they would fall out in the middle of the night, and the pressure, like I felt like it was like a lot of pressure because I like to sleep on my side.
Yeah,
and it wasn't awful. I figured maybe I'll abandon it because I'm doing all the other things. But yeah, I'll definitely try out the wax. I don't think we've done that.
Yeah, it's totally. I got it for my whole family. Everything. As soon as I got it, I was like, okay, everybody's getting these. These are great. So hopefully that's different. But just throwing that out there. You brought up, so as we think about magnesium and not eating dinner too late and other parts, right? It impacts our recovery, our sleep, our fitness, the whole nutrition side. And I think back to my dad that was a pediatric cardiologist and got him the 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. And he read that, like how to lose all this, go slow carb diet, loses 65 pounds in a year, starts running half marathons. Yeah. And he said, basically, I just had to unlearn everything they taught me in med school about nutrition. And I was listening to Peter Attia podcast on lactate yesterday, like his deep dive. And he was like, wait, but everything they teach us in med school on this, in high school, in college, in the textbooks is scientifically wrong. And the guy said, yeah. I mean, so it's crazy. We take these things as fact when they're not necessarily fact. So I'm curious, you being in the profession, but also being personally thoughtful of, hey, I'm not going to take this as a word from on high. I'm going to test these things out. What does nutrition look like for you now?
I do want to emphasize that point, Andrew, that my eyes have been open now too. Like as your dad was kind of alluding to, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to many things that we've come across over the last few years, like my eyes are open. So I take everything with a grain of salt now. I'm not quick to judge when people say, so as an example, carnivore diet, that's crazy. Maybe, but it seems to be working for some people. And so like, let's not just close the door because it sounds ludicrous and we've been told we need fiber and vegetables and fruits our whole lives. Like maybe let's just hear what people have to say. So I got to say, like in general, my eyes are more open than they ever have been. But when it comes to my own nutrition, a few things have changed over the years that has made a massive difference. So one is increasing my protein intake. And I think this is something that almost everybody and their mother probably needs to implement in their lives. So I aim for a gram per pound, and I'm about 205. And so that's a lot of protein. And I just feel fuller. I feel like my lean muscle mass has increased. I feel that after wearing a continuous glucose monitor, I've seen the differences made in terms of insulin sensitivity. It's just everything seems to get better. I have less cravings. Everything seems to get better with the emphasis of protein.
Are you able to get all of that from your meals, or do you supplement on the proteins? Because you talked about taking some BCAAs for recovery. What about the protein side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll take a step back. I've been doing intermittent fasting, or a better term probably is time restricted eating, or just basically skipping breakfast for the last 5 to 6 years. And my body comp was great, like a percentage of body fat. But I did start to lose a little bit of lean muscle mass. And I probably lost 3 or 4 pounds that I didn't need to lose unintentionally. And then until kind of like the protein revolution, if, for lack of a better term, came, I start to take that more seriously and get to where I want it to be. So short version of that answer is now I supplement. So usually my first calories are a protein shake, Guyata, obviously, and put a little, it varies on day to day, but if I'm at work, it'll be something like a vanilla vanilla powder with some almond milk, and that's it. And then I'll eat probably about an hour later. But yeah, now these days I'm adding some protein powder if I don't think I'm going to meet my protein goals. But some days, like on a weekend, as an example, I could easily rock that out. Like I'm a lot better at just more access to food and less distractions. Most days, though, I'm supplementing.
So that makes a ton of sense on the lean mass and everything, and especially as we're both getting older, right? It's harder and harder to put that on much and maintain it. What about creatine?
I started to reintroduce creatine because I feel like at least in our demographic, when we were younger, we were all taking it. Then for some reason, it fell out of favor. I don't remember why. And then now it's totally we're seeing another resurgence. But yeah, I take it daily. That's like, there's not that many things I take daily, but that one for sure is a no-brainer for me when it comes to increasing lean muscle mass, strength, recovery, cognitive function. It's just and the amount that is, how well studied it is, an absolute W.
And dead cheap, right? It's cheap. There's tons of evidence on it, and it's very easy to just like make it a daily habit. It's a no-brainer. Just get that win in. Yeah, as you said. Absolutely.
But yeah, otherwise from a nutrition side, like that's been my main guide post. Like so high protein, it's usually animal protein, and I don't really care what kind it is. And I will lots of vegetables, a little bit on the fruit side. If I know I'm going to have a higher starch meal, or I try and have it in the evening because I find that could make you feel a little bit sleepier, if anything. But yeah, for lunch, I'll try and reduce my carb intake, and then yeah, usually I'm with those changes. Though I gotta say, like I feel great. Like that's the one thing that I don't know. A lot of listeners might have that afternoon lull or post lunch lull or post breakfast lull. I don't get that anymore since making some of these modifications, and it's refreshing.
It's a really good point to make. Right? Like my dad losing 65 pounds, you're like, oh man, he must have really been starving himself. And my dad's point was, I was never once hungry, because if you're getting the right amount of protein in your diet each day and you're loading in enough real plants, not plant-based, because that sugar is plant-based. Like I can go eat handfuls of sugar and that's plant-based. That's not eating plants. Go eat plants and you load all the protein you need plus plants. You're only going to want so much other stuff like that. It's so satiating on what you need, and your body's getting what it needs from that food. That being said, so you do have some things you supplement with. If I'm not going to get enough protein from my diet because I have this restricted eating window, I'm going to supplement there. Creatine, I couldn't eat enough to get enough of that in, so I'm going to supplement on that because I see the benefit in the research. Magnesium, because I see we have some depleted soil, so maybe the nutrients I normally would be getting from this food isn't carrying through. I'm going to supplement on top of that. Are there any other supplements that, whether it's daily or not, that you say, hey, yeah, I kind of monitor my vitamin D in the winters, I'm throwing that on, or B12, or whatever it is that you might do?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. I don't take that much more. The vitamin D, because of being in the northern, like I'm in Canada, winter months for sure. I'm supplementing with vitamin D, and then the only other one I take daily, at least off the top of my head, is the fish oil. I just seen enough data to support for protecting your brain, reducing inflammation now, that I think it's worth it. And we supplement that with Guyata, but there's evidence to support that too. And I just feel like I'm not always getting high quality fish, and so I think to me it was just a nice, easy way of ensuring that I'm getting that fish oil.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Makes a lot of sense. All right, so the one. And you said we cut from the same cloth. That's why I always love talking to you. Like I always learn like it's the same cloth, but it's like that enough difference that it's like I'm going in the same direction, and you take me that extra 5%. It's like
love it.
So on mindset, right? Were you out of the box this way? Is it something you came through in high school? Right? You were in the medical profession, and both my parents being physicians, like there's a path there of we're taught facts. This is what the truth is. I know, and it's objective. there's a flip side of this of there's new research coming out daily that are challenging things that we thought were facts. And so how and where did you come into this mindset of, hey, it's not fixed, like I already know this, but more this growth of, I'm going to keep learning because the world knows more. I want to learn more too. Yeah. Can you talk about your journey there?
I think what it was, Andrew, was a bit of lack of confidence, actually. I was thinking about this the other day because by no means am I your typical doc. At least I did a training in internal medicine, which is usually super type A, super anal, cross every T, low risk approach to health. And I'm by no means that way. I'm outside the box thinker, always keen on learning why this may or may not be true. And medicine kind of unintentionally, I think, got me more in a black and white approach to my thinking. And like, this is right or this is wrong. This is the way or this isn't the way. And once again, the nature of the pandemic and just opening my eyes to things, like I've really pivoted into questioning everything. But even up to that point, because medicine was evolving always so much, to feel secure in answering a question about this is the best way to approach this, this is the definitive answer for this, you can't always feel that confident. And you see enough cases where what was supposed to be classic, like you have these patients with all these classic symptoms. This has to be a heart attack. This has to be a pulmonary embolism. And it isn't. It ends up being some weird and wonderful thing. So when you see someone that's overly confident with in medicine, that to me is always a flag, actually. And if I see it as a trainee, I squash it. No offense to all my former trainees, but if you're overly confident when you have only seen X amount of patients, you got to nip that in the bud, because that's only going to get worse, or they'll learn the hard way, or the patient will learn the hard way. So to me, yeah, this is something that's evolved. But I think what we need right now, and in terms of mindset in healthcare, is an environment where people could think outside the box. Like I mentioned this a lot in my book, Unapologetic Leadership, about the importance of outside the box thinking. Like I've seen it directly save lives. Like just a quick story, if we have time. There was a patient that we had where they were in a halo. They had their tube in for their breathing, and a halo being a neck brace because they broke their neck. And they somehow got rid of the tube out of their mouth. And what was happening was their airway was closing. They were what we call stridorous. They couldn't, like, their airway was, if I had to guess, was the size of a I don't know, like a dime or a penny. And so you had to like get a tube back in urgently, and we called for help, and we were in trouble. She was going to die if we didn't do something. So I'm in there, sorry for the details, but with a camera trying to find a way to get this tube back in. And this respiratory therapist, who was young at the time, suggested this way of creating more oxygen for the patient. So they basically put a tube that would go from the nose, and we'd be able to bag the patient through their nose, essentially. 90% of the people in the room have never seen that, but they saw it once and they thought it would be a good idea. Because they had that psychological safety, because there was an environment where you're allowed to think outside the box, they felt okay to verbalize it. And I promise you that patient's life got saved. It bought me another 5 minutes, and then you could put the tube in. And I was like, holy cow, we'll call her Patricia. Thanks for bringing that up. Like, I remember she said it. She didn't even say it loud. She was just like, what about the Hooper maneuver? I was like, yes. Like, I was just desperate. And holy cow. And so like that whole outside the box thinking, having that psychological safety, to me, is something that I truly embrace and that we need in healthcare right now in general. Because you're in the US system, I'm in the Canadian system. Canadian system is, unfortunately, we're not winning. And we need a little bit of transformation, and we need a lot of emphasis on preventative health. And so I think this is the time that we should be thinking outside the box.
Yeah. I mean, the world can't generate enough funding to address the sick care. It's just not going to work. If you look at where the population's going and everything. Yeah, obviously for the mindset and developing that, your book, Unapologetic Leadership, is a great place to start. Are there any other exercises, apps, tools that you use? Like, do you meditate? Do you do breath work? Is there anything for your personal kind of clarity and mindset?
Yeah, I love this. So going back a few years, I used to do a little bit of the Wim Hof stuff. I don't know as a swimmer if you
Iceman.
Yeah, Iceman. Without doing the ice stuff, I would do I just found the breath work got me into some mental clarity that really felt amazing. And so that was my introduction into breath work. And now I like the Huberman's, he calls it the physiologic sigh. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll do that sporadically throughout the day, like not necessarily routinely. I've found it absolutely helpful for mindset, just a gratitude journal at the end of the day. That's, to me, has been a real game changer, because you'll have this day where you're pissed off at the world, and you force yourself to kind of reevaluate your day and find the sweet spots. And then you'll find these moments that you totally forgot. Like that time where, like, I was thinking about one yesterday where my eldest son made me laugh so hard. We have this game that we do we call it LOL, laugh out loud. We have a competition amongst the 5 of us. You got to try and make each other laugh. And the last one, the only one that doesn't laugh wins or whatever. And so I can't remember exactly what he did, but he literally had me like on the ground, huddle over, and it was like, yeah, man, I don't know if I would have reflected on that if I didn't put that in the journal. And then the last one that comes to mind when it comes to mindset, and this one's relatively new for me, but Simon Sinek, I came across one of his quotes about nerves, about anxiety, and when you're feeling anxious in the moment, and he was mentioning how you could just those same physiologic symptoms comes across when you're excited. So change that mindset to just, hey, reframe and be like, this is an opportunity to be excited about X, Y, or Z. And I don't know, I've been finding that super helpful lately. And when you think about changing them, like, there's not much upside to thinking about dwelling on the negative and where this opportunity could go. But if you think about all the possibilities and why it might be exciting, it's fuel. So that's that one I came across a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to implement that on a daily basis. It's been awesome.
I mean, to really come full circle on this, it gets back to that Hamlet quote of there's neither good nor bad. It's our thinking makes it so, in that it's this label we put on. Is this excitement? Is this nervousness? And I remember, not to name drop, but in 2019, I was with Andrew Huberman, and we were talking about in a race, like the gazelle and the lion physiologically are having the exact same things happen in their body as they're hunting, right? Like the elevated heart rate, all this. It's just, one is this excitement, I'm about to eat. The other is this terrified, I'm about to be eaten. And so later in the day, somebody's talking to us about flow, the idea of flow. And Andrew Huberman saying, hey, is this what, like, Feynman was talking about, his work he saw as play? Is it the same thing? And so I started talking to him. I was like, I think this may be similar to the lion and the gazelle. It's the story you're telling of, when I'm in it, is this level of challenge and proficiency hitting? Is it this peak performance? Is this a game, right? Like, am I playing this game? And it's the story he was telling himself, is this game that I'm playing? And so, yeah, I love how we moved all the way around.
We're being lions over here, man. Ironically, Guyana is lion in Ghanaian, so I call it my spirit animal, baby. So yeah, I'm all about that.
So we really came full circle. I mean, it comes back to the lion and the Guyana. This is fantastic. Well, Kwadwo, this has been fantastic. Before we sign off, where can people find you, learn more about it? Obviously, we'll have your Lively page with everything we've talked about. Where else should they look for you?
Once again, Andrew, this has been so much fun connecting again. this is just a great format for people to get optimal health advice. But for us, you can find us anywhere on social. We go at Quadcast, so KWADCAST. We're on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X, Facebook, LinkedIn. We have a newsletter. We'll call it quadcast.substack.com, where we have all our content. Podcast called Solvent Healthcare. You can find it anywhere. We have a TV show also. You can see that on YouTube, Solvent Healthcare TV. Where else? We got the book on apologetic leadership. You'll find that on Amazon. Guyata Nutrition, so guyatanutrition.com for our latest supplement company. And where else can you find me? I think that is everywhere. That's covering a lot of bases. But we're everywhere. We try to spread our wings. So thanks again, Andrew, for this.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.